Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Ryan here. I'm going to be making a video on how to build a decent deck within Hearthstone. Most of these will be just little tips and pointers for building decks. They're all kind of generic deck building principles from most TCGs. I've picked these up over the years just playing different trading card games, and they seem to apply quite well in Hearthstone. The main reason I'm making this video is because I've noticed a lot of videos out there showing you different deck builds and how the deck works, but they don't actually explain the thought process into how those people made those decks. So there are people watching them and thinking, oh great, I can have this deck, but I don't know how to most efficiently play it because it's not my deck. And more importantly, it's not helping them as a player because all they're really doing is cloning other people's concepts. Which, I mean, I guess it does sort of help in building players. I mean, children learn how to draw through tracing, so I guess it's kind of the same thing. But I want to make you think about it more in depth as to why you're putting certain cards in your deck. And hopefully from this video, you'll be able to build your own deck that's actually quite functional and works well enough to win some consistently win some play modes and that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm going to be covering a few things. I'm going to be covering what synergy is and how to get kind of synergy working in your deck. And then I'm also going to be quickly building a warrior deck, which I don't currently have. Now, I kind of know how the warrior deck works, and I'm going to be explaining it as I go through, why I'm picking certain cards and how that relates back to synergy and how the deck works. So let's jump into it. Now, the first thing that most trading card games, when you're building a deck, the first thing you have to think of is what deck am I going to play and how do I best play it? As in, what does the deck do and how do I achieve this? That's one of the main things you need to think about when you're talking about trading card games in your deck. What is the goal of the deck? For example, in Yu-Gi-Oh! You have the Dark World Control deck. Dark World Control deck is based around springing a trap card, or several trap cards actually, which means if your opponent draws a certain card, they immediately have to discard it. So what you do is you do that, once you've sprung those trap cards, you have other cards which force your opponent to draw and discard cards. And the thing is, they will draw a card and then they'll be forced to discard one by the cost of whatever card they've already played. And then because of a trap card you've played earlier, they have to discard whatever card they just drew. So basically you're making them draw and discard their entire deck. Whereas Dark World cards themselves, when they're drawn and discarded, they get effects themselves where they get to draw more cards or search more cards or summon themselves. So basically what you're doing is you're filling out your field while making your opponent like discard their entire hand before they can do anything with it. That's the goal of Dark World Control. That's what they do. They make you draw through all your cards and throw them all out. In Vanguard, you have Nova Grapplers. Nova Grapplers are based around attacking multiple times in one turn. And how you achieve that is through stand triggers, which means after you've attacked once or twice, you can stand them back up and they can attack again. Think of it like, if you don't play Vanguard, think of it like Magic, where once a creature has to be tapped, stand triggers basically let you untap it and let you attack it again. That's how Nova Grapplers work, and they get benefits from attacking a second time or being stood up. In Hearthstone itself, if you've been watching me, you know that I'm a great fan of Total Biscuit. I've been recently watching the Polaris tournament. Total Biscuit's legendary Warlock deck. I watched him playing a game versus Panzer where he pulled out 2 summoning portals, and if I remember correctly, he had, I can't remember the name of the card exactly, but it's called like Faceless Void or Shifting Void or something like that. And what it does is when that card is played, it has a battle cry of copying another minion on the field. So he had 2 summoning portals, he summoned that thing, and that thing turned into a 3rd summoning portal. And he had another one in his hand, but he didn't quite pull it out. And what that basically would have meant is that the synergistic thing with his deck is it's full of legendaries. And if he has 2 summoning portals out, and he manages to pull out 2 of those shiftless facing voids, whatever they're called, and turn them both into summoning portals, he can summon legendaries for 1 mana cost. And even in that game that I watched, he pulled out a 5th turn Deathwing just because he could. Like, that Deathwing cost him 5 mana, so he was like, why not? I might as well do it. So those are kind of synergistic things you have to think about. That's the goals of the deck. That's the first thing you need to think about. How does my deck work? With my decks that I've got here, I've kind of thought of that a little bit. My Paladin deck at the moment is built around swarming out lots of 1 and 2 mana cost minions and boosting them up with other minions. It's basically built around swarming, but I boost their attacks with stuff like, what do you call it, the Alpha Direwolf, I think he's called, Raid Leader. You get stuff like that, and I basically boost their attack up for 1 turn. Oh, there we go. Direwolf Alpha. Adjacent minions have +1 attack. I have that. I have Raid Leader wherever he is. He's back a few pages. I have Raid Leader. I have Stormwind Guard. And basically what that means is I can swarm out lots of small minions and they have like 5 attack, but they only have like 1 HP. So that's what the strategy of that deck is. My priest deck there at the moment, the main strategy of that deck is to pull out the Gurubashi Berserker, nuke him down with my own cards while clearing my opponent's field using the Wild Pyromancer. So I will be casting spells which will be doing 1 damage to everything on the field, which will be continuously boosting up the Gurubashi Berserker, but those spell cards are also helping increase my minions' HP and shielding them and all that kind of junk. So that's the main strategy of this one, is to pull out Gurubashi Berserker with a crazy amount of attack and just attack them directly. My rogue deck at the moment is built around pirates, and unfortunately I'm a little bit short on pirates, but that deck it's working kind of alright at the moment, but I don't have the cards to flesh it out the way I want to. But at the moment my rogue deck is built around, let me actually have a quick look, because I think I did change it a little bit. Yeah, my rogue deck's not really working that great at the moment. It's still playing around with it. I'm getting a bit of success, but I won't really go into detail on what I'm trying to do with that one, because like I said, don't have the cards at the moment. But the main purpose of my rogue deck at the moment is just being able to consistently have out a weapon of some sort that I can attack with. So I'll be at least being able to use her class ability and then just throw a poison on it and have Spiteful Smith take a little bit of damage and have that. Or I can go for the, what is that 5 mana cost blade called? Assassin's Blade. Assassin's Blade, if I can throw Deadly Poison on that and then have Spiteful Smith out, get him enraged so that my weapon has an extra 2 attack, that's a 9 attack weapon, and then all of my pirates get like stupid bonuses like, who is it? Dread Corsair is basically free at that point. Bloodsail Raider will have 11 attack for a 2 mana cost minion. So that's kind of the strategy of that deck, but I'm still working on it a little bit. So yeah, those are some things that you need to think about. Another thing you need to think about is whether you want to go for the boss monster route or if you want to go for the kind of just more stable minion route. That is something that applies to a lot of trading card games. If you have one boss monster, they can be a real pain to deal with for a deck that is totally unprepared for it. Like, they can be just a game finisher for a deck that is unprepared for it. But a deck, in any trading card game, a deck that is prepared for a boss monster, that screws your entire strategy. For example, in my priest deck here, I have Gurubashi Berserkers. That's my boss monster, that's my main strategy. Once I pull out the Gurubashi Berserker, if I manage to get his attack up to a crazy amount, if I'm facing, for example, a mage, I'm constantly just worried about whether they'll drop a polymorph on him. And of course, I have no idea whether they actually are running a polymorph. But if they do run a polymorph, that's my entire strategy gone. Because the rest of the minions in this deck aren't that great, I'll be basically beating them down with like 3 attack minions at tops. So it's not really that great. So that's one reason that boss monsters are great, and they're also rather a bit of a downfall. Because if you can pull out that boss monster early and get it powerful enough, you can finish a game in like 2 or 3 turns easily. I've done it before. I've finished a game in, I think, 3 turns with my Gurubashi Berserker, just because first turn I managed, no sorry, not 3 turns, it was about 6, but it was a really quick game. But it was basically because I had Wild Pyromancer, Northshire Cleric, and my Gurubashi Berserker first turn, and the rest of the cards were just spells. So as soon as Gurubashi Berserker came out, I was just able to pummel them down to next to no HP and then hit them in the face for, I think, like 15 damage. So that was a really quick way to do it. So yeah, the strength of having a boss monster is that it can end the game really quick. But the downfall is if your opponent has a card that can counter it. For example, a generic card like Big Game Hunter, or that might actually be a hunter only card, but there's a card called Big Game Hunter, which is something like for any minion with when its battlecry is destroy a minion with something like 5 or more attack or 7 or more attack, that'll instantly flatten my Gurubashi Berserker, which rules that card kind of useless. So there's one idea. So boss creatures are something that you can think about. Deck weaknesses are also something else you need to think about. Like, for example, as I was saying with this, my weakness with this deck is that my Gurubashi Berserker is my go-to card. If my Gurubashi Berserker gets flattened, then I've got nothing else I can do. My Paladin deck, the weakness of this deck is while it's pulling out a lot of small, low-cost minions, and they all have like 4 to 5 attack each, the problem is they have about 2 HP. So once again, if I'm versing a mage, and a mage manages to pull out 1 or 2 arcane explosions, I'm done. If I'm versing another paladin, they can consecrate and there's my entire field gone and all the cards in my hand that I've played over the last few turns gone. If I'm playing my rogue deck, the one weakness to that deck is actually, I'm getting really frustrated at this. For some reason, people have started playing Acidic Slime quite a bit. Or the, whatever he's called, the little 3 mana cost guy. 2 mana cost guy. This guy. Acidic Swampoos, destroy your opponent's weapon. That's frustrating when I manage to pull out something like a 9 attack Assassin's Blade and it's immediately destroyed and I'm like, damn it. So yeah, that's a weakness of the deck. One thing that you can do is, I'll actually move into the next part of the points I was going to talk about, is Once you've figured out the strategy of your deck and put the cards that you want to put in that are based around the strategy of your deck, you can also fill out the rest of the cards with what you call filler cards. Filler cards are basically, you have one of two options when you're going with filler cards. You have cards that will cover the weaknesses of your deck, or cards that will help you achieve your goal quicker. In nearly any trading card game, your filler cards will either consist of those two things. If you've got a specific strategy you need to pull off, being able to draw cards is a great way to do it. So having stuff like Novice Engineer, where you draw a card just for summoning her, is a great way to do it. Acolyte of Pain, whenever it takes damage, draw a card. There's that other one, which is Death Rattle, draw a card. It's the exact same thing. Those are filler cards. Once you've got your main strategy in your deck in place, you just use these cards to kind of flesh it out so that you can try and draw through to that strategy as quickly as possible. And the other route to go is to cover your card's weaknesses. Like, for example, with my Gurubashi deck, I've got my Gurubashi Berserker. It relies heavily on having my Gurubashi Berserker, because without him, I'm kind of screwed. And to be honest, I'm going to be completely honest, I still haven't found a way to protect him. I can kind of boost his HP up, but I can't stop him from being one-shotted by certain cards, so that's one downfall. But if I'm talking about like my Paladin deck, over here, when it opens, just having minions with Divine Shield themselves makes, like, I can have a 1 HP minion with Divine Shield, and suddenly that's protected from one thing that'll wipe it off the field straight away. With the Argent Protector, I can pull out some of my minions and have them all sitting side by side, and I can have about 3 of them having Divine Shields up, which means since they only have 1 HP, I can be running them with, like, they'll have 5 attack and 1 HP, and I can be running them face first into 6 mana cost minions, and they survive, just because of the Divine Shield. So that's one circumvention of the deck's weakness that I have within my Paladin deck. So those are kind of filler cards. Like I said, the purpose of this deck is to swarm out as many minions as possible, and then, like Imp Master, for example, I have Tide Hunter, Raid Leader, Razorfen Hunter. It's basically summoning out lots of small minions and then boosting them up as much as possible. And yeah, just having Divine Shield, that's kind of circumvention. Like, I don't need these 2 cards in here, but they're in there just because they have Divine Shield, and that's something that helps me protect them. So there's something else to think about. So yeah, those are the main things that you want to think about when you're building a deck. Think about, what's the goal of the deck? How do I achieve this? What cards do I have on hand to achieve this? And can I actually do this with the cards I have? And do I want a boss creature, or do I want to go for a more consistent deck strategy? And what are my deck weaknesses? How do I cover them? And what filler cards am I planning on using? Filler cards usually aren't too important, but they can help synergize the deck by helping you get into your main strategy a little bit quicker. So I'm probably going to end the video here, and if you really want, you can continue watching, and I'll upload a second video, which will be me building a warrior deck for the first time, and I'll be talking through my process and how I'm thinking about what I'm going to use the cards for. And then after that, I might as well play a game with the warrior deck. So thank you for watching. Feel free to keep tuned, and hopefully the next video on the chain should pop up at the end of the video. So I'll see you then.